Something here is calling us forward, upward motion with drops in one ocean. Roll on. Will you rise up with me today? Lift up your voice and boldly say, we are the ones we've been waiting for. Live the dream of your highest calling. Be the hope of a new day dawning. We're the ones who can break.
Hi everybody, this is AGNT. This is Barbara Fields from AGNT, and you can't get my video because tonight's host is Mendy Audlin, who is joining us from the Unity People's Convention in Olathe, Kansas. And we decided to just do this today spontaneously. I'm thinking that people will come in and out of the webinar, and all Mendy's going to do is wander around and find out who wants to talk to us and tell us all the exciting things that are going on in the conference. So, Mendy, why don't you take over from here and we'll just see what happens.
Okay. Well, I can't figure out how to turn your camera on, Barbara, but it's really great to be here with everybody. Thank you all for joining us. We have, these panels are scheduled for Tuesday nights, but because of the conference, there's so many conferences going on within the New Thought movement, we thought this would be fun to do during our social hour. So we are here at the Unity People's Convention in Olathe, Kansas. And of course, this is the Building Spiritual Community Salon series through AGNT. So I want to thank you, first of all, for coming. You know, we always begin with prayer. So I'm looking around and I'm wondering if I might be able to find a Unity person who likes to pray. Do you think I could find anyone? Would you like to pray us in? Come on in. Okay, so this is fun. So I'm going to introduce you to Ken Daigle from Unity of San Francisco, and he is here with his Absolute Abundance program right behind me. So we've been hanging out. And would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Elizabeth Longo from Fort Lauderdale, Unity of Fort Lauderdale.
I know you. So would one of you like to pray us in? So this is the AGNT Leadership Salon on Building Spiritual Community. We've got people from all over the world joining us and listening through the archives. So would one of you center us in prayer?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Here, maybe speak into that little mic.
So we take this moment just to become conscious of our breath, that gift of life that we take in and release constantly. We suddenly become aware of this precious gift. And as we take one more breath, we know that we have all that we need. In this moment, in this breath, we are centered in the presence and as the power of the divine. And as we lift ourselves in consciousness to the awareness of this and to all of our fellow beings on the planet, knowing that as we come together in celebration of life itself, that we raise the vibration and the planet together as one celebrates this day. We are so grateful, so blessed, and fully present together, we say. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So thank you, Ken. So we are, as part of the series, if you've been following us for a while, we've been talking about building spiritual community. And we've talked about everything from building your mission to different disciplines for building spiritual community, prayer, meditation as part of your community building practice. We've talked about, last month, we talked about connection and how to set up communities where people can easily make friends and create that kind of connection. So here, since we are at the People's Convention, the theme this year is 2030. And we've been talking about what does church, spiritual community, what does that look like in 2030? We know it's different. We may not know exactly what it looks like, but we know things are changing. So what we're trying to do is cast that vision. And so my first thing, before we get into going around and talking with people, for those of you that are joining us, I would love to know that you're here. So Barbara's checked in on the chat, saying thank you for joining us at the People's Convention. For those of you that are participating, if you can say hello, let us know who you are, where you are, and anything that you'd like to share about your vision of what's different about spiritual community in 2030, if we were to vision ourselves there. And I think equally important is what's the same. What doesn't change? What are the things that are consistent that we can build to? So I'd love to, can I interview you? Can I ask you a few questions? So I'm going to pass the mic a little bit. But let's just think about, take ourselves, if you would, take that centering breath and kind of allow ourselves to drift beyond the present day and float into the future, this magnificent future that we are co-creating together, knowing that this future is amazing and magnificent, that transformation is happening, spiritual communities are thriving and flourishing. What does it look like? What's different, and perhaps what's the same? So I'm going to pass the mic over to Elizabeth. Reverend Elizabeth, what do you see?
Well, I just see a total different world in the outer.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's changing because technology has changed a lot. So there's a lot of AI, and everything in the outer may change, but our inside, our very source has not changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so our basic desire to connect does not change. And so we need more and more and more the deep connection, the heart to heart, the safe place that we can go and take a breath together.
I agree.
So presence, that's what's really, really important now, because everything is changing and changing so rapidly that nothing from the past we can really hold on to except what's always here, the present moment, the timeless. So it's really important to check in, to be real, and have a safe place to have community.
Absolutely. I agree. Thank you so much. So Ken, what do you see when you think, when you put yourself there in 2030?
Well, it was so fascinating to be here this week talking about 2030. I just came from a silent retreat last week in Louisiana with my father,
Nice.
who has been going to this same retreat house for the last 30 years, right?
Wow.
Every year he does this silent retreat. And he's Catholic, and it's an Ignatian retreat. It was delightful to go with him. So this retreat practice from hundreds of years ago that's passed on, and that there's a whole community still practicing at this retreat house. There's 5,000 people a year that come through and do a silent retreat with them. So it was so fascinating. What was amazing about this juxtaposition is that the practice of being in the silence doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
The technology may change. We may meet up in different medium and in different ways, but that the spiritual practice of going into the quiet, going into the silence and listening to learn the truth for ourselves exists then, now, and in the future.
Oh, yes.
All three are necessary and going to be vital, that connected.
I agree
True.
Completely. So I see people checking in, and I just want to do a shout out to those of you who are using the chat room. It looks like we've got Carolyn Douglas. Oh my gosh, look over here. Okay, come on over. So you may have seen, the little flyby in the back. I got to pull over. Jim Blake, our CEO, just walked behind me and is standing with nothing apparently to do other than come and be on our at our salon. So Jim Blake is here. Jim, we're here with AG&T. Barbara Fields is here. We're checking in from all over. Carolyn Douglas from San Jose. CSL is here. People are checking in, panelists and attendees. It's really exciting. Barbara says she's envisioning spiritual communities that reflect the diversity of our whole communities, and we show up in support of one another, ready to serve where it's needed. And then thank you for all of you who are checking in. So we're talking about building spiritual community and tying to the theme of this year's Unity's People's Convention. The question is, what does building spiritual community look like to you in 2030? In 2030, if you were to take yourself there, transport yourself into the future, what's the same and what's different?
So
Here, I'm going to give you my little tiny mic.
oh, weird.
Yeah.
Okay. So in 2030, my hope is that there is no difference. It's all sameness. So it's all interfaith. So the spiritual communities are all coming together and addressing and working together to address whatever the issues are in the community, specific to each community. So regardless of what the faith tradition is, we're honoring of one another's faith traditions, but we're working together to address whatever the issue is in that particular community, whether it's hunger or homelessness or financial disparity. But whatever that issue may be, all the faith communities are coming together to address it as one. That's my hope.
I see it. So do you see anything that's different? Do you see communities like our churches there, or is technology taking over? Like, what do you see changing in that arena?
I think yes. So I would say yes to all of those. But I think there'll always be a role for church because people have this need to belong.
Yeah.
And so it may not look the same. There's always going to be a need for a place for people to gather together and to have this sense of belongingness. Now, it may not be. I heard someone. I think maybe it was Bishop Carlton who said it last night. But I love the saying now. It may not be in this form of the sage on the stage, but I think there'll need to be a place for people to gather and have that sense of belonging and community always.
Yeah. Well, beautiful. So Jim Blake, CEO of Unity Worldwide Ministries, here for the Unity People's Conference, where our theme is 2030. We're thinking into the future, casting the vision and then seeing what do we need to do now so that we can be ready for it. Thank you, Jim. He's also, of course, part of the Leadership Council for AG&T. So shout out from Barbara. She's given me the hi, Jim. So yeah. So thank you for being part of this. And of course, walking past us is Richard McDeesey, who many of you know from Pausapalooza, from his amazing music ministry, from his work with Unity. There you are. So Richard, we're talking about building spiritual community and then tying in this theme 2030. The question is, what does spiritual community look like? What's the same and what changes? What comes to you?
Well, spiritual community, of course, music is such a huge part of spiritual community because when we sing together, we share our thoughts, our hearts, our vibrations, our sound. So for me, spiritual community in 2030, wherever we are, we'll be singing together.
Oh, yeah.
And my mission is to keep writing songs that bring people together in a spiritual community.
Yeah.
So the songs that we put out and Empower, it's going to be all supporting transformation on this planet, personal transformation and evolution through music.
Yeah.
And I always see music as a part of any spiritual community. There's always going to be music a part of that. I think that's going to be the constant.
Yeah.
You know, it's been since cave walls. You see people dancing around a fire and celebrating their spirituality. It's been part of our spirituality for millennial, and it'll still go on.
Yeah, that's not going to change. That's not going to change. It's just bringing people together. So thank you for the work that you do, the universal, timeless gift that you bring to us through your music.
Thanks,
Richard McDeesey here at the 2018 Unity People's Conference.
Go AG&T!
Go AG&T! So we welcome, thank you, Richard. We're welcoming all of you from the New Thought community, as I know many New Thought centers are having their conferences for this year. So if you have a vision or an idea for what you see spiritual community being in 2030, we'd love to have you share in our comments. See lots of people checking in. Oh, good. And then more people wandering by. So thank you, Ken.
Oh, here we go. Is that Kelly?
That's Kelly Isola. So I'm going to turn the mic over, and I'm going to thank all of you that are joining. I see Jim and Judy and Laura and Sharon and Terry and Teresa. So thank you, everybody. Ayada and Elle. So thank you for being part of this gathering today and bringing your energy to this conversation. So I am here with Kelly Isola, who, in addition to being an amazing spiritual leader, minister, she's also an incredible leadership trainer. She's a visionary, and she sees trends. So she is the perfect person for us to be talking to about what does the future look like for us, Kelly, and how do we, as leaders who are, tasked with building spiritual community, how do we prepare ourselves for the changes that are coming in 2030? So I'm going to give you this little mic.
Okay. So first of all, when you first said, how do we prepare ourselves? My very first thought, and this is at the end of a long day, keep in mind, was go get a job at Starbucks. But I say that tongue in cheek because
it's not far off. So when I say get a job at Starbucks, what I mean is that that is ministry. That is community. That is, you build relationships. If you think Starbucks, and I'm just using that as one of many examples or metaphors, people come in and they order their coffee, they order their drink, and they order it the way they like it. And it takes a couple of times, a few times, and they come in and you say, "Hi, Tom," and you start making the drink before they even open their mouth. Because you've spent time getting to know them. And I know that it's, coffee, but spiritual community in the future is, in large part, we have no idea what it's going to look like.
Right.
And the biggest thing we can do is be willing to sacrifice everything, bring everything into question. Absolutely everything is up for negotiation. Everything is up for looking at what does this mean, and why do we do this, and how, and you start to discern and learn and see how much you just do unconsciously and how much you just do because that's what we've always done. I just finished, I teach for Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute several classes, and one of them is called Trends in Ministry, and I just finished that. And it is, the class is all about it. I've taken a deep dive into the trends that are happening out in our country and in the world in terms of religion and spiritual community, in terms of generations, the silents, the boomers, the traditionalists, the Gen X, millennial, Gen Z, and to see what's important for them and what they're responding to and what they need. And we have to be willing to look at what's important to them.
Right.
For millennials and older Gen Zs, it's actually finances. What's really funny about it is that the older Gen Z, younger millennials have some values that are very much like the boomers.
Oh,
success and money and career. And so spiritual community, it's not that there's no interest in spiritual community, but what the interest is now we build spiritual community around what they value. Right. It's for those that are online a lot, it's safe spaces. It's safe, sacred spaces. And having that. And there's just an enormous amount of having to embrace and engage with chaos.
Yeah.
You have to be able to welcome the I don't know. You have to be able to say I don't know. You have to be able to just, let's just try.
Right.
Let's just do this. We have no idea how it's going to turn out, but let's just try this. And that's what we as spiritual leaders have to engage with.
Yeah.
That everything's up for negotiation. What you think you know, you don't. And being open. Like last night, we heard David Alt say, "I'm available." We just be open for everything. One of the things that fascinates me the most about what's changing in our landscape is that Islam is the fastest growing religion. And there's a reason for that. It has nothing to do with the horrid things we see on the media. What it has to do with is that if you take a deep dive into Islam, it's about being in service in your community, and it's about taking care of each other. It's about giving financially to charities. And there's just this solid core commitment to humanity. That's part of the theology. That's part of the community. It's not about the building.
Right.
It's not about the building.
Yeah.
It's that safe space that people want. It's that connection. It's that community. And, oh, by the way, here's the theology.
Yeah.
There's the ritual of prayer. There's the ritual of, so it's just, there's things about Islam that makes it the fastest growing. So it's, being open to what we don't know.
Yeah.
Being open to
I
what's
love
happening.
that idea of being open to the chaos.
And welcome it. Not just
welcome it,
but welcome it and be
comfortable with chaos.
Yes, comfortable with
chaos.
Oh,
I know. So this is like, I picked the best place ever to stand because everyone has to walk past me to get to the snacks. So I have behind me here Reverend Paul Hasselbeck, who is one of my teachers.
Hi, everybody.
And we're here with AG&T. This is an online leadership salon focused on leadership and community building. And since we are here live at the 2018 Unity People's Conference, and our theme is 2030.
Yeah, 2030.
2030.
Wow.
It's not that far off, guys. Not that far away. And we're casting a vision. What does building spiritual community look like in 2030? What's the same? What's different? And what do we need to be doing now to prepare ourselves for what's coming? What do you think?
Oh, geez.
Loaded question?
Yeah, it's like, you've always picked the small questions.
Yeah. Just,
right?
Light supper talk.
The light stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, in some ways, it's even difficult to look a year ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, because things are moving so rapidly that even tracking a year ahead. And of course, the work with me is I tend to be on the teaching end of the scale, and I'm all about promoting a teaching that we find in all of our writings, but it's not talked about, that we are the divine. That the divine isn't in me like a wiener in the bun, or I'm not a vessel, or God's talking from me through me, or anything like that. It's from me, and owning our divinity. And I have a sense with the younger people, generation I work with, they seem to resonate with that better, because it's not a God that's a deity or an entity, and they really groove with the idea that it's principle and law and that sort of thing. And so I think we have to move in a direction that aligns with that vision. And the irony is, our founders all talked about it, and it was a part of their teaching that I think it's gotten lost. And how do we revive it? Because that I think is going to attract new, younger people, and then it's going to be organic. It's almost like, so I've never been a fan of a 5-year plan.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? So it's like, what's mine to do in the moment, and grow this thing organically. And I honestly don't think I can anticipate what's going to happen in 2030.
Yeah. One of the leaders that I study in terms of church growth is from a fundamentalist background, but one of the things he says that I think is brilliant is he says they don't do 5-year plans, they don't do 3-year plans, but they plan for the unexpected opportunity that they can't conceive of now.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. So what is mine to do now? So what is ours to do as individuals, churches, and communities, and then be open to what is the next thing that's mine to do. And move into that while staying centered in a very particular theology, a spiritual philosophy where we have answers and we're questioning those answers. So we keep moving forward and we stay at the cutting edge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, I thought Richard Bunch was going to come talk to us.
Oh, he could do that.
He winked and waved at me, so I thought...
Looks like he's on his way to a meeting.
He's on his way to a meeting. You never know who I can pull in and who I can't.
That's right.
I agree completely. So it's a changing paradigm. And I want to thank those of you who have joined and who are commenting. I see Jim Youngman is in at Unity of Melbourne.
Oh,
so that's awesome.
Hey guys, I'll be down there in a week. Unity of Melbourne.
I'm just scanning through this. So yeah, thanks for your comments. Thank you, Sharon, for your post. Yeah, so Sheila's here. I can tell you to our Melbourne friends that Sheila from Melbourne is here. I've met her.
It's Melbourne, Australia, not Florida. I'm not going to be there.
Florida's nice too, but Australia, that's pretty fun.
Yes.
Hey, I'm wondering if I can recruit Sherry Jameson over there.
Yeah, Sherry, you can come on over. Come on.
So I'm right next to the Unity table. Thank you, Paul, so much for jumping in. So I'm here with Sherry Jameson. She's right next to me. She's got all of the, this is the Unity table. So we got Daily Words, we got Unity Magazine. So I'm going to do all your pitch. You got all kinds of cool bling over here. But Sherry is, oh, there we go. Outreach packet. So Sherry is talking about 2030 and what's changing. I think one of the things that's going to be very different is outreach is not going to be an option. I think that's going to be something that's going to be the heart and soul of spiritual community that we'll put together, that we can't grow spiritually without connecting with each other. Sherry is here representing Unity World Headquarters, correct? And she is their outreach director, outreach coordinator. So I'm going to let you share a little bit about, we're talking about the vision for 2030. What does it look like? How do we start the process today so that we're ready for the changes that tomorrow brings? What do you see in terms of outreach?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I also want to add that I'm on the Focusing Forward task team with Unity Worldwide Ministries.
Nice.
And my focus is on the music and arts sub-team, but I'm also on the core team. And I was just talking with them earlier about creating a next gen sub-team as well.
That's great.
So, but in terms of outreach, I think you're exactly right. From the articles that we've read on the core team, the world is going to go through a huge transition in the next 15 years. Looking at just some of the outer changes, self-driving cars, the share economy, like Airbnb and those sorts of services are more common. artificial intelligence is going to be a huge society changer, just like the internet.
Yeah.
And it's even possible that our AIs are going to know us better than we know ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately you may ask your AI, given what they have observed, the whatever it's going to be
They
called,
monitor your pulse and your breath.
Yes,
and everything.
yes.
Yeah.
And they're going to know how you think better than you do. And they may even suggest a religion for you based on what they think, what in the past has made you happy and what it projects in the future will make you happy. So obviously this is not a guarantee, but it's a trend.
Yeah.
And it could be.
Yeah.
And so if we want to maintain our sense of autonomy and personal growth and dominion over our own consciousness, I think it's important to keep in mind that these changes are coming down the line, and what do we want to presence for ourselves in this rapidly changing landscape.
Yes.
Now, outreach, as I'm sure was mentioned before, is highly valued by the millennials and the next generation beyond, after us. And I'm a millennial. I think it's really amazing, the gathering together of people in their free time, really, to do good for the world, and they care about the environment, they care about social justice, and we're going to see that more and more. And fortunately, that means that more and more problems are going to be solved down the line because people are thinking about it now.
Yes.
So
yes.
I think if we can embrace that and really support the people who are taking that on as their passions, that will go a long way in supporting this transition into 2030. And really for the leaders out there to find those young people in their communities that they can mentor, that they can support. You have no idea how much it means to us when a leader in the community approaches them and invites them to be part of the leadership team.
True. So true.
That they may not even know, oh my gosh, I can apply to be part of the board of trustees of my church.
Yes.
That would be a welcome thing. Wow. And just finding ways to grow and learn and teach and instill a sense of personal accountability and loving kindness and care for each other, and growing the leaders of tomorrow, I think is going to be so huge. And that is a kind of inter-church outreach that you can do in developing leaders for the future.
Yeah.
And of course, beyond the walls of the church, finding, making use of materials such as the Unity Outreach Program, the packets, and the free materials that are available, and of course, materials from others as well, to find ways to do church beyond walls.
Beyond the walls, exactly. Well, and I think that's a really great point, is if we're thinking that the millennials are too young, if a 20-something is how could they be qualified to be on the board? We need them on the board. We need them in leadership positions.
Training.
Yeah, in fact, I was just in a session with Jackie Linotti about social media, and so she had everybody on their computers and with their Facebook, and where do I click and all that. We have so much to learn from this new generation that is not new, but tapped in and connected in ways that older generations are not. So the sooner we can get that into our leadership, I think the better. And then I also agree that, so we're so connected digitally online. There's so many ways that next generations are going to be connected through artificial intelligence. Who knows what the future looks like. But what I know is that sometimes when things happen so fast, when you can, binge watch a whole season on Netflix of, your favorite thing, and you don't have to ever work for you don't have to wait for things. Everything is on demand. That sometimes there are certain things that I think, like relationships, like spiritual growth, that take time. And to be able to be fostering in that sense of, a lot of things can be immediate with our technology, but sometimes we just got to give things some time, and to have spiritual leadership that can nurture that and support that in a generation that maybe is not so used to that. So, okay, will you join us? Are you able to join us? All right, so thank you, Sherry Jameson.
Thank you. And just last thought,
yes, please,
to go off of what you said, is that, I don't think millennials have the shorter time, memory time span that people sometimes say we do. Because there is a depth and an awareness and a willingness to work. Things have not come easy to our generation. We graduated college just after the recession of 2008, and so there are a lot of millennials struggling and have learned resilience through that. And I think in that way, we are more prepared for the changes that are coming down the line because we've had to learn to navigate that. So I think teaching resilience, continually fostering new leaders, and speaking kindly to each other.
Yes,
I think will be the top recommendations that I want to leave everyone with.
That's
so thank
beautiful.
you all.
So Sherry Jameson, if you have any questions about if you're a Unity affiliate or even not, if you want to take part in some of the outreach opportunities through Unity, call Unity, ask for Sherry Jameson, because she has got all kinds of free materials, seriously free, not even shipping, free materials that you can use for outreach so that you can start making a difference today in a powerful way.
Yes, including churches outside of Unity.
It doesn't have to be Unity. Yeah. So that's just for everybody. That's for everybody. So thank you, Sherry, for the work that you're doing. It's great. And look who's walked past now. I have Kira Bear, my good Texan friend over here from Houston area.
Yeah.
And so Kira, this is AG&T. We have Barbara Fields here with us, and then all of our webinar friends who are joining us from all over. And again, Jim asks, is this being recorded for later download? And yes, it is. Barbara will send this out afterwards as a recording. So thank you for asking that, Jim. Jim's in Australia watching right now.
Fabulous.
Isn't that cool? So Kira, we are talking about building spiritual community, and the theme of this year's People's Conference is 2030. So we're kind of casting the vision for the future. And we're just talking about what are the things that you see for building spiritual community. How do we do it in the future? What's the same, and what do you see changing? How do we prepare for that?
Yeah. Well, I think that we actually go to where are people experiencing transformation in their lives, because there are those that are actually already exploring in lots of different ways, and we may need to broaden our conversations, first of all, because there are those that are not ever going to come to a church. Yes. They're not going to be involved in that kind of conversation, but they're hungry to have a conversation about what's real for them and what they're experiencing. People are opening up into multidimensional awareness of empathic experiences and abilities. Yes. There are things that are happening in their journeys and their spiritual consciousness that they are seeking someplace to have a conversation about. Yes. And I have found so many times they don't feel that they've been given a safe space to be able to converse things that don't fit into the paradigm. Right. And so that's one of the things I see as a way that we reach out to the younger generation that are going to Peru and having ayahuasca experiences, or they're going and exploring with shaman about how to really sit into a deeper experience in sacredness. And I think that those kind of things need to be engaged along with recognizing that those are other pathways to Christ consciousness, as we call it. You know, we give it that terminology, but it's really just owning our divine essence and the sacredness of all life. So the more that conversation is engaged, and they're very socially active, you know, I mean, social justice active, I was going to say, taking care of the planet and getting out there in service projects together. So I think some of those are ways I see it anyway, that we expand the conversation in ways that are outside of maybe what we've been comfortable with in the past. Yes. And yet they happen over coffee, or they happen sitting around a campfire, or they happen going and picking up trash at a park, you know, cleaning up the ocean, whatever. It's really a lot of those conversations that are also about who am I being in the midst of what I'm doing here to be one with the planet and one another.
Yes.
So those are
beautiful, beautiful. And I know you're in the Bay Area, so you're just outside of Houston. And so I also know from speaking with you in the past that your ministry took a brunt when Harvey came through not so long ago, and you got to see a different side of ministry.
Oh, yes.
In the future, as we have perhaps more extreme weather conditions, things like that. Talk about, what do you see as the role of spiritual community in times of that kind of tragedy and challenge?
Yeah, and I will just say, we also were one that our backyard is the Santa Fe shootings that just happened. Okay, this is in our backyard. These are people in our community. Yeah. So we not only had Hurricane Harvey, where the 50 inches fell, and a large number of our community devastated, we've also had this, that now really takes your breath away when you say that these are people that were rebuilding their homes and their lives in this community, and now they're burying instead of graduating their children. My God, what do you do with this? The depth of that and the feeling of that. And I say it chokes me up still because it's profound. And yet it takes us to our core. Yeah. To our deep vulnerability, where we hold the paradox of humanity and divinity, which are one. And there is always going to be, there's a moment of deep grief and struggle in the crisis to make sense of it. And there is celebration going, because there's others that are still fulfilling their dreams for the first time and living out this profound life. And we are, as a spiritual community, holding all in the midst of that and being present with them in a deep way. So what is it to come together as community and be willing to say, all right, we're going to cry together, we're going to laugh together, we're going to do this together, but to know that we're not alone. We don't need to go into isolation feeling ashamed because our society has lived out shame so long. Oh, somehow I brought this on to me, or I did something. We are in a time that we get to come to a spiritual maturity and an emotional maturity that holds the paradox. And I think that's the place that I find spiritual community comes together. We show up in your home and say, what do you need and how do we hold you? We say, come cry on my shoulder. Let me cry with you, and then let us laugh. And let us rebuild and let us create together anew, because we're being invited to create anew who we are with one another. Yeah. So it's a profound time, I feel, in this journey we're on. And I actually have found in my community, part of what they're hungry for is a new way of messaging and understanding, how do I live in this paradox and how do I message it to myself as well as to my community and to one another out here in the world. And they look for an ability to be positive and real, right? It's not like, we sugarcoat. It's about, here's the authentic way we can take that on and process the feelings and see that there's hope in the midst of the devastation. Yeah. So we talked about today in the conference about that there's chaos. When you're in creation process, there's a chaotic time. And I believe we're in that in the world. We're in a birthing, and it's like it has to be chaotic so it can birth the new. But being able to make sense of that and be present with what's there in it without getting caught in an old story. Yeah. So I think we're messaging in a new way.
I do too. So what has this experience called forth in your community in terms of spiritual growth?
It's called forth an authenticity with one another. It's called forth being present in a way of, what does it mean to go and come together? We were 24/7 practically during the aftermath of Harvey, and we all were experiencing PTSD. We really had to go, what is it, to process that PTSD and come together and say, let's cry, but let's also take action. We were like on the road every single day. We gathered a whole group of us. It might have been 20, it might have been 35. We're a small community, but it's like as many of us came together. And what we did in the process of that was we said, all right, who needs the help today? And we literally then just assigned out and went out in groups and split up and said, all right, I'll do this. Hey, I have a plane. I'm going to go fly in supplies because we can't get them here. Somebody else brought in a truckload of supplies. It was amazing to watch how the resources that showed up It's the fishes and loaves. We saw that today in the conference when there was a need spoken, and wham, everybody stepped up and said, let me do this, let me do this, let me do this. And that's what happened in this. Yeah. And there was such a sense of communion with spirit, but in a very physical, tangible way of bringing it out into somebody's life.
Yes.
And, you know, and then we found the humor and the joy in it. Yeah. You know, when somebody was like all their things piled in the front of their house, and we're helping them, you know, cry and also separate and identify and be okay with that. And in one of the big books that was there was the power of letting go, you know. So, you know, in this,
it's a sign.
So you find the moments of just a sense of that deep, profound connection, and that's what the community really changed us.
Yes.
We feel so close and woven together, and willing to be with one another in a new way.
Yeah. I love that.
More
so
authentic.
There's a question, why do we need a crisis in order to collaborate so generously? And I think in the future, if I were to cast into 2030, we don't need a crisis, that we maybe have gone through enough of them to recognize that we are interconnected, that we are one, that maybe that's the learning curve. But I think in 2030, maybe by then we've got it. Yeah. And it isn't so necessary for us to have something tragic happen for us to be crying together and serving together and growing together and loving together.
Yeah.
So
I love that. And I wanted to add one more thing, because I think the other thing that's happening is the birth of creativity out of it. So people are becoming more creative about what's possible, what is available to them. And our creativity is going to be what serves us in 2030 to keep us from now needing a crisis. Instead, we'll be celebrating the diversity, and we'll be honoring each one and already be in that connection. So that I see that as not necessary in the future also. And thank you, God. Or essence, or divine flow.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to that. So getting lots of love from the comments that, you know, you're awesome, and people saying, yes, we get it. Love the vision in the comments from
thank you.
Kira Bear from Unity Bay Area, Houston.
In League City, Texas.
In League City. So thank you so much for being part of this salon.
Such a great blessing, and blessings to all of you out there.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So again, we are at the 2018 Unity People's Convention, and our theme this year is 2030, and how do you build, well, we're focusing on building spiritual community. What does that look like in 2030? So if you are watching this and it's brought up some questions, or you want to share, raise your hand, or you can always also put it in the chat. But if you raise your hand, if I'm smart enough, usually Barbara's the host, so I'm going to have to figure out how this thing works. But it's really great to have so many of you joining us for this live session. And of course, I know many of you will be sharing this in the archives as well. So Barbara's over here texting me saying, if they raise their hand, I can add them. Please, we'd love to hear your vision. What does 2030 look like to you? What do you see as the same? What do you see as changing? And how do we prepare for that? Or can we prepare for that other than just doing our own spiritual practice and growing and centering ourselves in what we know? So I'm going to, Barbara, if you're available to come back, I would love to hear your comments and your perspective as you are leading the Association for Global New Thought into this future that we are co-creating together. I'd love to hear your thoughts for what does 2030 look like to you?
Wow, thanks. For one thing, I'm really enjoying this program today because it feels so vital to be there with you live, even though we can't be there with you, and we have been in spirit. So this has been a lot of fun. You know, my vision might seem a little bit radical because, well, maybe it's not radical for New Thought. New Thought is a tradition that I appreciate so highly because it's not an extremist insistence upon its own identity. Mm-hmm. And as some of you know, I've been active in the field of international interreligious dialogue for 25 years or more. Mm-hmm. And I've worked with a lot of different religious leaders and religious traditions that are very proprietary in terms of insisting on their dogma. And they're not bad people, and they're certainly intelligent. But when I came across the leadership of the New Thought community, I realized that the universal acceptance and inclusivity of New Thought doctrine was so much more inviting and welcoming to people outside of New Thought that could relate to the values that we share without stuffing dogma down everybody's throat. So my vision for 2030 is that we will become, I wouldn't say an anonymous community, but a transparent community that welcomed ideas, creativity, service, love, compassion, without needing to put our stamp all over everything all the time. So that's kind of what I wanted to add at this point. And who's there with you now?
Let me unmute myself. So yes, so thank you for sharing that. So I'm here with Reverend Jerry Farrell, and I can see on your name tag you're from Grass Valley, California. I'm not sure exactly where that is.
It's north of Sacramento.
North of Sacramento.
Oh, Mandy,
So,
can I
yes.
ask you? I have some dear friends who go to Jerry's church.
Oh dear. Who's that?
Who is it?
It's Carolyn and Sanford.
Oh, yes.
Nice.
Wonderful people.
Yeah.
Nice. So Jerry was passing by and got looped in. And again, I want to thank Reverend Ken for flagging people in for me today. So we are live with AG&T, and this is part of our monthly leadership salon on building spiritual community. Of course, since we're here at the conference and the theme is 2030, we've been talking about what does building spiritual community look like in the future? What are the things that are the same? What's different? How do we prepare ourselves and our ministries, our organizations for the changes that lie ahead for us? So I'm going to share my little microphone here, but what comes to mind for you?
Well, I just came from a presentation on courageous conversations. And I mean, this was talking about every ism that there is under the sun, and the need for us to really take a look at ourselves, you know, as Unity spiritual communities and others in AG&T, that, you know, sometimes we think perhaps that these conversations are beneath us or they're not relevant. And, you know, we just sat in a room of people sharing, unfortunately, experiences that they had at our centers where someone who was transgendered was discriminated against, or someone who was Asian was there for 3 months. Nobody asked her name. You know, her sisters, who I guess were white, were welcomed and included and brought into things. And people would kind of hug her differently than how they hugged her sisters. I mean, it was just amazing, some of the stories that were told. And I think a lot of people were really taken aback by what people had to share. So, you know, we're not immune from needing to do these conversations.
We've all got work to do, don't we?
Yeah,
we've got work to do.
And, you know, what struck me was that this is the heart of spirituality and of religion, and it is becoming aware of all of the repressed emotions and all of the stuff that we've stuffed down that we haven't dealt with because we've never had those conversations. And we need to do it, because if we're going to go forward as an enlightened movement, then, you know, this is where it begins with ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for jumping in and being part of our salon this week here at AG&T for our monthly salon.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, Barbara, I think everyone's going to dinner, unless I can round up anybody else. Can you get any of them want to come? I've got a few still lingering in the lobby. I'm going to see if anybody wants to come over here, or if they're a little too shy, too nervous, or too busy. So I'm seeing. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I've got Karen Tudor coming over. So I think we have time for one, maybe two more. So Karen, would you like to come over? This is, I'm going to share what we're doing. This is AG&T. I'm here with Barbara Fields. Hi. And we are doing our monthly leadership salon on how to build spiritual community. And since the theme of the 2018 People's Conference is 2030, we've been talking about what does building spiritual community look like in 2030? What are the things that are the same? What are the things that are going to be different? And then what can we be doing today to prepare? So do you have any thoughts, ideas you would like to share? This is my little microphone on this.
Perfect.
There you go.
Well, thanks for letting me crash your party.
Yeah. By the way, Reverend Karen Tudor is with Unity of Houston.
Yes.
So a fellow Texan like me.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. Thanks so much for inviting me into the conversation. I'm really loving what we're learning and exploring in this convention, and it's excited me, and it's a kind of confirmed for me a direction that kind of entertaining about ways that we really have to open up our churches and our communities out to the community in a big way, where it's not just inviting people in for our specific selected events, but to help people start to feel some kind of ownership in a spiritual sacred place that they can come and be who they are, and bring do some of the gig economy things that kids are doing. Kids, I say, that have their laptops in Starbucks because they don't want to do it at home alone and isolated. What would it be like if they came to our campus? What if that was their work area? What if we became their people? And what if they stopped for yoga, and maybe they sat at lunchtime and studied a book together? Or what if this became their community, whether we ever saw them on Sunday or not, whether they're quote unquote churchgoers, but really, how is it that we can meet spiritual needs and a sense of community and bonding based on what people themselves believe they need, rather than what we keep trying to throw parties for people and then invite them to come and then beg them to come, and then
they don't want to party
and measure our self-esteem on how many people came.
True.
It would be so much better if we just took their lead and let them lead their own way, and we support that, because we do have principles, but above all, we love first, and we know everyone brings their light. And what if we allowed people to share their light in some kind of way? Do I know what I'm talking about? No, I don't. But I have a vision and a picture of what a full campus could look like. During the weekdays. What if our weekday attendance was greater than our weekend attendance?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just entertaining that thought.
Possibilities. Yeah. Being open to what the future is bringing us, and being responsive.
Right.
I love the idea of being responsive to what people are seeking, instead of having an agenda that we're trying to drive.
Exactly
and
right.
impose. So thank you, Karen.
Cool,
Thanks
thanks
so much for joining
Thanks
us.
for letting me pop in.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Carry on.
Carry on. I tell you, you never know who's going to be walking down the halls here at the Unity People's Convention. I want to share, as I know we're kind of getting to the end of our time together, Christine just shared a beautiful comment. Many are the ways to share the mystery that is. The greatest of these is love. To love one another truly without expectation of gain is to transform the world. And Christine says, I'm learning to move beyond possession and manipulation into awareness of lovingness, where I need ask for not, and simply share my love. So Christine, thank you for sharing your comments. Thank you to all of you who've been part of this interactive and live and a kind of impromptu salon this month. Again, we do this every month. It's usually, what do we do, Barbara? I think it's the second Tuesday.
Second Tuesday of every month.
Second Tuesday of the month in the evening. So if you've missed some, you can go to the archives and catch what we've done in the past. And if this was a lot of fun, tell all your friends and come and hang out with us again when we do it again next month. So Barbara, any closing thoughts, closing words you'd like to share?
I'm glad that we captured the recording of this. I'll send it out on Monday. Okay. Anyone can go to agnt.today, and you'll see a section on the menu that says salons, and that's where you can easily find all of Mendy's recorded programs, and you can view those recordings for no charge. And you'll also see what other salons that we're offering and be able to tune in on those as well. So we have a big meeting with the AGNT Leadership Council coming up in Chicago in 2 weeks. And we're going to get a download from everything that happened in the convention, because I understand some of the CSN people are there too.
Yes, we have Ken Gordon is here, Steve Burton is here, Tracy Brown is here, and that's just the ones I've seen. So there's probably others floating amongst us that I don't know, but there's a great representation of the New Thought movement here. And the big announcement from today that I am most excited about is the conversation about bringing more unification into our New Thought movement, collaborating more, working together more, not just unity within unity, but bringing the concept of unity, the idea of unity, into our entire New Thought movement, and finding ways that we can work together so that we are ready for whatever the future brings us, that we are centered and we are dealing with our stuff and here to serve. So it's a really exciting time to be part of the New Thought movement.
I'm so glad to hear that that was the conversation, because since 1998, the entire reason for Association for Global New Thought to exist has been to gather the leadership from Centers for Spiritual Living, which was then a divided organization, as many people know, the leadership from Unity, the leadership from Agape, affiliated New Thought Network, Universal Foundation for Better Living. Our entire reason for our existence is to talk about the way that we can craft unification and collaboration, at the same time honoring the specific mission and identity of our individual New Thought organizations, because our unity is in our diversity. And if we model natural systems, we will know that that's the only way that anything ever evolves.
Exactly.
So we're extremely happy. I'm extremely happy to hear that that's what the conversation's been, because it's going to lead right into a great conversation with all of us at AG&T in Chicago.
Absolutely.
I want to thank everyone who came today. Mandy, I want to thank you, because you are just awesome when it comes to on your feet and welcoming anybody here. And I'm glad that everybody will have a chance to see the recording, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to talk to you or anyone else at the Unity Conference this
That's
year.
right. Yeah, and thank you everyone for your flexibility with this, because this was a much better time to be able to, you can see there's just amazing spiritual leaders floating all around, but yesterday they were all in the keynote. So it was really, I appreciate, Barbara, you being flexible and moving the time around a little bit so that we could have this experience and hear the wisdom and the insights and the perspective of so many amazing spiritual leaders out in the field doing this work on behalf of the New Thought movement. So this was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Okay, well, thank you again, and good night, everybody. Thanks for being here, and stay tuned for the recording. It'll come into your mailbox on Monday. Thanks again, Mende. Have a great conference.
Thank you, Barbara. Bless.